Okay, in this video I want to talk about a paragraph that's on page 13, at the top of page 13, and this is in section 1.3 on the private language argument. And there's something in this paragraph, a couple things in this paragraph that are important but easy to miss, so that's why I want to go over it. Okay, so let's begin just by going through it. Recall that in this paragraph, Appia is explaining the situation which Hobbes and Descartes thought was possible and plausible, but which Wittgenstein is going to show us contains a problem. So this is the scenario. We can start by considering in a little more detail the kind of private use of language that Hobbes thought was possible. Suppose I have an experience that I have never had before. For a Cartesian, that is for Descartes or for anyone that agrees with Descartes, there can be no doubt in my mind either that I'm having the experience or what the experience is. Still, since it is new to me, I might want to give it a name just so that if it ever comes along again, I can remember that I have had it before. So I call the experience a twinge. Okay, we'll use that word in a second. That's going to be important. I know exactly what a twinge is like, and I just decide to refer to things like that as twinges. Of course, I cannot show you a twinge, and since I don't know what caused it in me, I don't know how to produce one in you either. Okay, so this I don't know what caused it in me is going to be important, so we'll come back to that. My twinge is essentially private. I know about it, and no one else can. Okay, so again, and just right after that, as Appia says, this story seems to make sense, but Wittgenstein thought that if we analyze the matter a little further, we could see that it does not. Okay, but what exactly is the issue here? That's what I want to talk about. So I have this. It's already written out because I just went through this, but I didn't have the video on, so I wasn't recording. Okay, so let's try it again. So here, consider two categories of sensations. And the first one is a sensation that's tied to something outside your mind. And the second one is a sensation that is completely internal. That is, it's not tied to anything outside your mind. Okay, so what do I mean by tied to something outside your mind? So let's look at this example, or consider this example. So imagine that someone smashes your finger with a hammer. Okay, so obviously if someone does that, it's going to hurt a great deal. And if someone asks you about what you're experiencing after your finger gets smashed with a hammer, you might just say, well, it friggin' hurts. Or if you want to go into more detail, you might explain how it happened, that the pain was caused by this kind of incident. And so when you're explaining the sensation, notice if you say, well, it hurts because someone whacked my finger with a hammer, you're tying your sensation, or you're grounding your sensation in something outside your mind. That is the being smashed with a hammer. Okay, now consider, still on this left side here, consider that 1 year later, someone again smashes your finger with a hammer. Doesn't matter if it's the same person or if it's the same finger. The important thing is that it's the same injury causing a similar sensation, and it's caused by the same thing, by being whacked with a hammer. Okay, so now our question is, are these two sensations the same? This one, call this one number 1, and this one number 2, are they the same? Well, notice that the situation we're in here is different than the kind of situation that we're in when we're trying to compare other kinds of qualities. So, so here the quality is being in pain, having that kind of sensation. But if the quality is, say, like your height, so imagine we want to know if your height on your 16th birthday is exactly the same or different than your sister's height on her 16th birthday. So that scenario, that situation is similar to the one we have here with the being smashed with a hammer, they're, we can't just line them up and compare them. Assuming you and your sister don't turn 16 on the same day, we're talking about something that happens at different times. But unlike the sensation problem, it's pretty easy to determine if you and your sister are the same height on your 16th birthdays. You measure you on your 16th birthday, and then whenever she turns 16, we measure her. And if we want to, we can even make sure that we use the same ruler or whatever. So that's pretty easy to figure out if those two qualities, your heights, are the same. But for a situation like the one we're in over here on the left, having the sensation you have when your finger is smashed with a hammer, it's harder, and I would say, in a certain sense, it's not even possible to determine if you are having the same sensation here in number 1 and in number 2. But nonetheless, even if we can't say that the two sensations are the same or exactly the same, we do have a meaningful way of saying that they're the same. Namely, we can say, well, the cause of my sensation at the first time here was getting hit with a hammer on a finger, and the cause of the sensation on number 2 here is exactly the same, getting a smashed finger with a hammer. So even if we can't compare the sensations themselves, we can note that the cause is the same, where the injury happens is the same, and so there's a meaningful way of talking about these two sensations being the same, even if we're not in a position to kind of line them up and compare whether or not they are in fact exactly the same. So the moral then for the left side here is that when the sensation is tied to something outside your mind, like a hammer whacking your finger, then we do have meaningful ways of talking about the sensation. Okay, now let's switch over here to the right side. So now we have a sensation that is completely internal, and by completely internal I mean not tied to anything outside your mind in the way that the hammer was. So, and this is what Appia is talking about in that paragraph that we just looked at. So, just taking that scenario, imagine that you have a sensation, and in this case, what we mean is you have the sensation, you don't know what caused it, there was no cause like, for instance, a hammer whacking you. You don't know what caused it. You don't know exactly, we're supposed to imagine, you don't know exactly where it's localized in your body. That is, you don't know, can't really point to where it is, but you just have the sensation. I don't know how often that happens that we can't, point to where it is or figure out what caused it, but that's what we have in mind for our twinge in this example. Okay, so then what Wittgenstein wants us to think about in the quote that follows the paragraph that I just read on page 13 is a week later you have a sensation and you think that you're having another twinge. Okay, so the question is, how do you know that you're having the same sensation? How do you know that it's a twinge again? Well, I mean, again, we can't line them up and compare them, given that they are this kind of mental thing, they're sensations. So that's out, just like it was on the left side. But furthermore, there are no cues, no external cues to tell us that it might be the same sensation. There's nothing that we know that caused it. It's not, we can't say where it is in our body. So the thought is, and I think this is right, you can think about it yourself, the thought is that we really have no grounds for saying that this twinge, the second one, is the same sensation that we had the first time. And that's basically what Wittgenstein is getting at with his private language argument. And so the idea is anytime we have these completely private mental states, here we're talking about sensations, but it can be anything else. Anything that's completely cut off from the external world, from what's going on outside your mind, we can't talk about in a meaningful way. That's the conclusion of the private language argument. Okay.